saw your name when I saw Wonka.
I had a really, really specific job on Wonka. We were at Air up in Highgate, and this was just a massive orchestra. I mean, everything about that film was on an epic scale. It was massive. The whole production was massive. Lyndhurst Hall in Air is like that, because it's this funny hexagon shape. And the music itself just sort of resonates in the space, and the space is sympathetic, I think, to the music itself. Whereas there are some spaces you play, and would be another example that's not terribly pleasant to do. I'm Ben Morales-Frost. I'm a film composer, theatre composer, and orchestrator and arranger. This podcast will self-destruct.
Hey guys, I've got a quick request. Could you subscribe, like, and comment if you like the content we're making? It's really important to support the channel and carry on having great guests like we've had. So subscribe, like, comment. Very important. Thank you. Thank you for coming here.
My pleasure. What a crazy venue.
So, can I ask you to introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced to start?
Sure. I'm Ben Morales-Frost. I'm a film composer, theatre composer, and orchestrator and arranger.
Cool. And you have an interesting background.
I have a weird background. Yeah.
I'd say interesting.
Complicated.
You didn't start being a composer.
No.
Maybe you can start even earlier. When did you start doing music and playing music?
What, a fetus.
Maybe
embryonic. Maybe a bit later.
Interestingly, 2 previous episodes. One has been published with Annie Pye about music psychology of children and prenatal, so fetus level. So there's a lot of really interesting things that I can't recollect. Everything that was said is very often in the podcast where I mostly forget probably 80% of what's been said. Mm-hmm. She has really interesting things to say about our music development from the womb. Uh-huh. And there's another episode that hasn't been published, but just going to be published probably next week, is about music that is a super skill and can help you develop a lot of other skills as well.
I read something recently that people who carry on playing an instrument sort of suffer less from dementia in later life.
Yes.
That was published a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I definitely think there's something to that. It's really challenging.
I mean, there's tons of research, but we've just not spoken to the research to enough.
Yeah.
Actually, so the guest is Victoria Williamson.
Okay.
She's going to come back on the podcast as well, about more on using music for work and productivity and well-being. But the book is called You Are Music, and it's definitely on one of my top 5 books.
I'll have a read.
It's
that sounds
really
great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How music. What are the benefits of playing music for our musicality, but also for other skills like reading, our motor skills, or just associating our motor skills with our visual skills. So if you read something, how quickly can you reproduce? Or if you have visual information, how you can get your brain to work on your motor skills as well.
Okay.
Which is really, really interesting.
I definitely think there's an overlap between music and maths.
Yeah.
At A-level, I did further maths as well as regular maths. Mm-hmm. And everybody in my further maths class, there were 7 of us, everybody was an advanced musician. There was a 100% overlap between very, very good musicians and very complicated maths. I don't know why. I have no idea why. I think maybe it's about patterns or... I don't know.
Well, we can ask Victoria.
Yeah, I don't have the answers to that.
Great.
So you asked me about my background. My background. There's definitely a family history of very good amateur music making. Mm-hmm. There are choral singers in the family. I have a grandfather who died when I was 2 or 3, something like that. But it turned out, and we only discovered this a couple of years ago, he actually had gone in and made a record. He was a pianist, and this must have been maybe in the 60s or something, 50s and 60s, and you could pay and go and record your own record. Okay. And so my father found this somewhere in the house and got it transferred onto CD, which was great. And he was an amazing pianist, but he played by ear and he improvised.
Okay.
And on the other side of the family, there's an organist who used to play at Manchester Cathedral. So
great.
Definitely on both sides of the family was this a tradition of good music making, but also this, I suppose, improvised and playing by ear, which has been the entire bedrock of how I learned to play. I had piano lessons from 7 or 8, but I remember very distinctly pestering my mum for them. I actually can't remember why. I don't know why I'd become obsessed with having them, but I remember asking for them. And it was on my birthday that it's one of my earliest childhood memories. I remember mum saying, your birthday present is to have piano lessons. And that always makes me laugh because...
Were you happy about it?
Oh my God, overjoyed. It was the best birthday present ever. But I can, you see kids now and going to their music lesson is a chore. And that's one of the things they hate doing in the week.
Yeah.
But that was very exciting for me. But actually, I didn't respond to lessons particularly well. I did... I stayed with them for a couple of years. I went to this fantastic place called Peppercorns in our local town, St. Neots, where it was a lovely sort of atmosphere for learning, but I was just terrible at practicing because I just didn't like practicing what I was told to practice. What I actually wanted to do was go and play anything that was in my head, whether that was a theme tune from something or a bit of classical music or a tune I knew, anything like that, and I would work it out. And that developed bit by bit. I was given various bits of sheet music, and it was often for things like musical theatre, because I always enjoyed seeing stuff at the theatre with the family. We had a big tradition of going down to London and seeing things. And so I had these just tons of books, but often they're very simplified piano arrangements, but they have the chord symbols. And I just became very, very good at interpreting those, but developing them into a bigger version of the piece that was closer to how I knew the piece went rather than what was actually written on the paper. So, for instance, I would play the melody as I'd heard it being sung on a recording rather than as it was written on the page. Because often the recording...
that's called talent and creativity.
What it was. It turns out it was really annoying for piano teachers because they would just say, could you just play what's on the page? I remember being told when I was at secondary school and my lessons had carried on, I remember being told to stop looking at the keys and to look at the page. But I wasn't ever really playing what was on the page. I was playing my interpretation of the piece. I remember I would take a CD album and just put it on the piano in front of me and play from memory and by ear the track listing, but also turning it into a sort of one big medley. And hours of my life disappeared to that. I was very, very lucky that my bedroom was on the ground floor, and my parents, for my 17th birthday, rented me a piano. So I had a piano in my bedroom, and that's basically all I did. I'm pretty sure that my chemistry grade is not as good as it could have been because I was just spending my whole time playing.
I think it's more what you were doing. I remember doing it a little bit, and there's one of the episodes, or 2 episodes of High Point, I spoke with Evelyn Glennie.
Oh yeah.
And we spoke about curiosity and how it's just easy. It sounds, well, obviously you seem to be very talented and very curious, but it's just to say that anybody who plays music who is interested in music, you don't have to be talented to do those sorts of things. You just need to be curious, and it's important to be curious to explore something and have fun instead of following a certain structure.
Yeah.
And listening religiously to a teacher. It doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to your teacher, but it's a big deal at the moment with me, and also my kids, on what's the level of curiosity, or just is it idling, the words, where you just need to explore, take the time to explore, because later on you want to have time, as we said before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I see this in my own nieces and nephews, finding the thing that they really are interested in and respond to. It's really rare when you do. Kids have loads of interests, but they do them and then they abandon them, or they just do exactly as they're told during them. But I have a nephew at the moment who is really responding to music. I remember he sat on my knee a couple of Christmases ago at the piano, and I played the Jurassic Park theme because I know he's obsessed with it. And he was just flabbergasted. And he says, "How do you know that?" And I don't think he'd ever seen up close that you can make music come out of a piano like that. And it sort of blew his mind. And it was such a lovely little moment.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 8. Perfect. Exactly the age I was really fired up by playing.
A small anecdote that my daughter, who's 5, I said, "What instrument do you want to learn?" And she said, "I don't need to learn an instrument, I can play guitar." And I said, "Yeah, but you need to take lessons." "But I can already play it."
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's just out of tune.
Yeah.
And she will love singing it.
And
she will
of playing guitar.
It will be the action. She will hold it very well. She will be very serious about it. It will be very out of tune, and she will do whatever. But, I just thought, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a start.
Yeah. And you just need to love the instrument, and maybe you'll have a bit, you'll understand what I mean.
Yeah, and you have to want to be able to make music from it, and be interested in it enough to go and play it, and not in your head brand it as practice, where it feels like a chore and a stress.
It should be more playing.
Yeah, it should be playing. I used to just lock myself away and play, and before I knew it, I'd gotten really good at a very specific type of playing.
Yeah.
Weirdly, it was only years later that my sight reading caught up with my level of playing, and that I'm pretty sure that's because of choir singing. I've always sung in choirs since school, and I still do. And
what sort of genre?
Well, I sing with the City of London Choir, so it's the core repertoire there is 20th century British music, but they do other amazing stuff, basically anything in the choral repertoire. And we sing with the Royal Philharmonic, various other orchestras. We sing at the Albert Hall, the South Bank Centre.
Pretty serious.
Oh yeah. It's always very.
Is it a job? Are you paid for it?
No. It's an amateur choir.
Okay.
But the standard is incredibly high. Everybody has come from a serious choral background through school and university.
Yeah.
So the level of performance is amazing, and commitment as well. But definitely that's helped with sight reading.
Yeah. And then, so when did you do some formal? Did you carry on learning formally instruments and piano?
No. So this is where things go a little awry. When it came to picking GCSEs at school, you have to pick 12 or 13 or something like that subjects. And the music teacher at the time said, pick what you want. I want to teach you GCSE music as an add-on, like separate from your regular lessons, because he said, I think you'll be fine. And so that was agreed. I was just going to have a couple of extra lessons a week and do an additional GCSE. And then that teacher lost their job over the summer.
Oh, no.
For reasons on a different podcast. And that never happened. So I did not do GCSE music. And which meant that all of a sudden some paths were closed off in a way. So I didn't then naturally go on to do A-level music. But my entire world at school was the music department. It's where I spent all my minutes when I wasn't in another lesson.
Yeah.
Carrying on with my piano lessons, talking, all my friends were doing A-level music. I basically absorbed most of their teaching peripherally from the side. I went on most of their trips, their concert trips and things, and but I just didn't do A-level music. Then I had a gap year off, and at the time, I didn't know. So I'm not a performer at all. I hate performing with all my heart. I can play the piano very well, but as soon as I perceive that somebody's listening,
there's an audience.
It all goes to pot. Yeah. And it's the same with singing as well. I don't like singing in front of other people unless it's part of a choir. I think that's why I'm in a choir.
You don't want to be heard. You want to enjoy singing, but you don't want to be heard.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't know that other than being Beethoven, other than being an incredibly serious, formal composer, I didn't really know what jobs there were to do in music. I definitely wrote to music at that point, and I have very vivid memories of just sort of lying there on my bed, aged 17 or 18, and just imagining music and making music in my head. So I was composing, but I didn't know I could do anything with that because my interests weren't serious, formal, contemporary classical music. So I ended up doing a gap year in a completely different world. At the time I was going to go into computing. And so my university place was computer science, and I did my my gap year in industry doing that.
What did you do exactly?
I worked for a company in Cambridge called Cambridge Consultants, and I basically did artificial intelligence, like early stuff, robotics, programming, like literally programming microchips to do things. Bluetooth had just been invented. I was involved in some early stuff there, to like testing chip, crazy stuff.
Did you like it?
No. It was. I was okay at it.
Yeah.
And I was interested in it, but it soon became apparent to me that I was in the wrong world. My trouble is I'm interested in everything. That's a blessing and a curse. I'm curious about everything, and I have the fortune to be okay-ish at quite a lot of things. So anyway, I was doing that, still involved in musical endeavours. I sang with the Cambridge University Music Society, which has a terrible acronym. I'll let you work this out. I had an amazing time with them, made some lovely contacts.
Okay.
Yeah. That was fun. And so when I did go up and take my university place, I swapped at the very last minute. Basically, I couldn't switch to music because I didn't have GCSE or A-level music. Mm-hmm. So I sidestepped into another interest, which was architecture, which, again, I think one of the troubles with the way education works in the UK, you have to focus so quickly on very specific things, and yet you don't really know what you're doing. And it's all led the wrong way. I didn't know where I wanted to go at all, but you're forced into making quite big decisions.
I can't agree enough with this. It's crazy, and it's even more crazy. I feel like in the UK, people are still open-minded about it. So you can do a geography degree and end up working in finance.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
doing something science related or technical. If you do a geography degree in France, you have to be a teacher. You can't do anything else than being a teacher.
Okay.
Well, I'm exaggerating, but so your path is set from really early on, and it's really hard to deviate from it. And I kind of found it as well in the UK. And then since being independent makes me, I feel bad about doing something else than acoustics, like podcast as well sometimes. But then it's so important to
definitely
have that opportunity to do something different, just to enjoy more the main thing you're doing.
Yeah. I feel like in America, they're much, much more open-minded about you doing multiple things in your life.
Yeah.
We have the very, I think, pejorative term jack of all trades, but master of none. I think I think you can be good at multiple things, but here we like to silo. I mean, in the UK, we like to put people in silos and label them as, you do that, you can't do anything else at all. Whereas I feel like in the US, it's much more embracing of people doing multiple things.
There's a really good book called, I think it's called Peak. It's Peak or Range. I can't remember. I read it like probably 7 years ago. And it says you have to excel in something, to be an expert, you have to do a lot of different things that are not necessarily compatible with each other, because they can help you understand or have a different perspective on your main specialty.
I mean, I think that might be one of my useful things, one of my unique things, that because I have taken such a convoluted path. I mean, I changed at University to architecture, but then when I left to go and do a technical theatre course, I realised university was disastrous and not taking me where I wanted to go. And so I ended up working in production in theatre. To start off with, mainly opera. So I did work experience at the Opera House, the Royal Opera House, and then toured with Opera North for 5 years, having the most amazing time. But what that meant was that I was sat in rehearsal rooms with some incredible creatives, seeing theatre put together. You know, one of my absolute favourite experiences ever was the Opera North production of Peter Grimes, directed by Philida Lloyd, who had just, like a couple of years earlier, just done Mamma Mia, and was in this crazy, giddy rebound from that. She's like, oh my God, I didn't know it was going to be so successful. And I loved being in that room as she sculpted this piece of, to my mind, the best opera ever written. But also it's not dissimilar to a Stephen Sondheim musical as well. I think it's incredible.
Hang on. How did you get those opportunities? How did you get those opportunities? Like, it's not given to everybody.
No.
I also want to understand for obviously people who have the same, or maybe not, people who would want to get into theatre and they want to understand how much grit it takes. If you had to have loads of different shots, and like you had to have 100 shots or send 200 emails before having just one answer. How did you get that opportunity?
So while I was studying technical theatre, you had to do, this was at Guildford School of Acting, which has since merged with the University of Surrey. But at the time, it was this lovely independent thing in the middle of Guildford. And I was doing a 1-year postgrad course, even though I hadn't actually graduated. So they let me on the postgrad. And you had to do a period of work experience towards the end of your course.
Yeah.
And I got it in my mind that I wanted to do the Royal Opera House. I don't remember why. I love opera, and I wanted to do something involving music, obviously. All this time I was still writing music, by the way, just on the side. So I was lucky enough through, I think somebody at Guildford School of Acting had a contact at the Opera House. I did a couple of weeks there, lived one of my relatives lived in London. I stayed in his spare room, had an amazing time at the Opera House, learned a lot of things, but then I think it was fixed in my mind that I wanted to end up working there. And then my very, very first job after leaving Guildford was a tiny little opera company called Mid Wales Opera. And I think they advertised for the position and I applied, but also I think one of my tutors might have known somebody involved there as well. But I got a nice recommendation and I got that gig, which was nuts. It was a touring gig. There's very limited amount of money involved. And you're the stage manager, also in charge of costume and building the set and lighting as well. So you really are most of the production. And we drove around the UK for 4 months, during which I learned so much. But also I'd never been so tired in my whole life. And then that, again, through a contact in that, an Opera North, I heard about an Opera North job. And I didn't really know about Opera North at the time, but I went there and it's the most wonderful place to work. It was a lovely step up from that previous job. And it was like being part of a family because everybody there is on a full-time contract. But which is weird. It's so rare in theatre and music to have that sort of thing. It's like the old theatre repertory companies where you become part of it. And like at Opera North, they do 3 shows a season. So you're just constantly rehearsing something and putting something else on at night. It was wonderful. And the stage manager there had worked at the Royal Opera House.
Okay.
And when the Royal Opera House advertised an assistant stage manager job, I applied, but also because my stage manager there at Opera North had worked there, he gave me the most lovely reference. And I remember coming down for the interview and then was offered the job, which is what I was aiming to achieve, having been there in work experience 5 years earlier. So that one was just a lovely sort of fortuitous sequence of events that led up to a job advert and me responding to it.
And you were still writing your own
music? Always writing.
What were you writing?
Well, I was still obsessed with writing, at that point, musicals, which for me were... What I always wanted to do was tell stories with music. And musical theatre is one way of doing that. Opera is obviously another way, but film music is it's any time where the music is doing a massive part of the storytelling is really interesting to me. And I was writing through university, and I've got so many basically failed, uncompleted musicals and things like that.
That's how you learn.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
You mess up.
How easy would you say it is to write music? Is it accessible? How accessible it is? Is it do you have to be talented, or can anybody do it with?
I don't know.
With some interest.
I think you have to be interested.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to write something very prosaic and cliched.
Yeah.
But I think that's how we all start. You start by piecing together the cliches.
Yeah, and understanding how they work.
Yeah, and that's why it's a cliche. It works like that. And bit by bit, you start to develop your own voice and realise what the cliches are, and then actively try and avoid them or destroy them or make them work to your advantage. I mean, the reason cliches work is because they work. And what we think of as cliches, at some point they weren't as well. Somebody invented them.
Yeah.
And then 30 or 40 years later we go, oh, that thing again. But actually, that thing didn't exist. For example, John Williams' sort of style of writing, or an Andrew Lloyd Webber song, and nobody was writing them like that before they wrote them like that. And now we think, oh God, it's just ubiquitous. But actually, I don't think that. I genuinely enjoy the stuff. So yeah, I think it's quite easy to write. Well, I think it's the same as writing text though? Like we all had to do creative writing at school.
Yeah.
Right. Presumably you did it in French. But
no,
we did English lessons at school and had to write stories.
You could, but I didn't enjoy reading until really late and writing. So therefore writing.
I never enjoyed writing at all. Writing stories like that. So yeah, but I think we can all do it to some extent.
Yeah.
It's just whether you enjoy it.
Agree. No, I completely agree. And I didn't enjoy reading until late, but now I just keep reading.
Yeah.
And I think it's just again, it comes down to education, what you get told by people you admire or people who teach you. Yeah. And you don't question it. So they tell you something and okay, that's it. I'm like this.
Yeah.
It won't change.
I think what really helps is during your education is having people give you the space to play.
Yeah.
And try those things and write and create.
Yeah.
Not judge them in any in any objective, or do I mean subjective way? Whatever. And let you try those things in a really safe space. And that's actually, weirdly, the bit I feel like I missed out on, because I didn't do the formal education route through school. I didn't do some of that, or didn't have some of those opportunities. But I think by being on the outside of it, I did just play. That's what I did. And I think it's meant that I've ended up with a voice that's a little bit different from my contemporaries. I didn't know the rules through school and university. I didn't ever formally write a Bach chorale. I now can, having learned it much later. But by not doing those and getting those embedded in my head, I just did it my way, which I think has led me to leads me to make musical choices that are slightly more random and different to other people. So I don't know whether that's a better thing or a worse thing, but it's just...
There's tons of things that spring to my mind. First of all, there's one of the last episodes of the Diary of a CEO. I can't remember the name. He's a psychologist, and he was saying that I think it's that episode. Anyway, that people, there's different types of skills you have to have in school and in the professional life, and there's the students who will be really good and really talented students because they will learn things very well and they'll know perfectly what to answer because they've learned it very well. But they will struggle to deviate from any rules and therefore will not be as creative. That's the trend. Yeah. It doesn't mean everybody's like this. But in the professional life and I think it's a business... there was a business discussion on this, and it was saying that people who create their companies or creative people were probably generally not the best students, but it didn't mean they were not talented. It's just that they weren't allowed to deviate and were not fitting in that frame. But now they're allowed to deviate in after school. And they can express themselves, and in creative industries like the music industry, what we want is uniqueness. They are not afraid of trying and testing things over and over again until it actually works, or they find something that works and can focus on it. So yeah, it's I can't remember why we're saying that. Why I thought that when you were saying it, I can't remember. But
being outside of the rules, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And one guy that I'm thinking about now is Jacob Collier, who I'd love to have on the podcast, but he's still a VIP for High Points yet. We'll see one day. But he keeps talking about the freedom he had to explore things. and how now he's recognized for like how he harmonizes things that is different from the others, and it looks like he dares looking at music in a different way. I guess there's a lot of people who are doing this, which you were. There's probably more media who were interested in him and his story, but it's
he's very much more of a performer than me. Can't imagine anything worse than actually having to perform my music to other people.
And it's also why I like, so I was talking actually to Inigo earlier, that I don't want High Point to be just famous people, because there's a lot of things to learn. There's always people who've got amazing stories, amazing skills, something interesting to say, like you have, and we can learn from. So it's quite interesting. I like doing the podcast for that.
Well, I mean, the music industry, this is what I didn't know at school. It's vast. There are so many people making music, and there are so many roles in, even specifically just the film music industry. There are so many people doing things. There's so many ways you can contribute to the making of music. I just didn't know those existed. And everybody has a really interesting story about how they got there or why they're doing what they do.
So you were making music, composing music. And at that point, when did you think, did somebody hear about your music, or did you say, I've had enough with theatre?
No, it's exactly that. We're now in my mid-20s, something like that. No later than that. And I'd been in theatre for 5 years, working as a stage manager, but really, really spending all my time writing music. Like at the Opera House, I'd be just studying the scores, and then at the end of rehearsals, going and playing them on the beautiful Steinways that they had in the rehearsal space. And at Joseph, as I say, I was writing all the time that we weren't doing a show. And I had this crazy plan that, right, I need to stop doing this. I've gone on the wrong path. I need to do music. That needs to be my career, because it is actually what I do and what I love. And it just took me a long time to really see that was achievable. I thought I'd missed all the boats. So what I did was go and apply for a load of postgrad composition courses. One at Trinity in London, the Royal Welsh College over in Cardiff, and encouraged by a friend of mine, I applied to Juilliard as well in New York. Massive pipe dream. And I got an interview at Juilliard, which was amazing, which was, thrilling, having sent some scores off to them. And you basically had to go over there for 3 or 4 days for an audition process. Which is obviously much easier for people in the States as it is than anyone else. So I asked for some time off at Joseph, and they couldn't give me the time off for this audition. So I ended up going much higher up in the production company and asking, and telling them about this opportunity and that I really, really wanted to go. And they arranged it, and it was very, very kind of them to do that. They brought in an old employee of the company to cover me for 4 days while I went off to New York for this audition. And actually, the audition didn't go especially well while I was there, but 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from that same person in the production company saying, so we basically saying, we didn't really know you did music, but this opportunity's come up to work on a new production with us, and we need somebody who is very organized, good with people. So that was my stage management background. I mean, you spend your whole time organizing people, looking after people, but also can deal with the musical side of things as well. We need somebody to sort of musically coordinate this project. And it turns out the project was Andrew Lloyd Webber's sequel to The Phantom of the Opera, which was called Love Never Dies, and it was about to rehearse, and then it was booked into Abbey Road to record 3 weeks later. And so the very next day, I was there in Andrew's conservatory in the middle of the West End. He had this incredible office, this Victorian school that he owned, and the back of it was a conservatory, and then he had the house behind that as an office as well. And there I was in this conservatory. He's playing the score. The Broadway and the West End's best singers were in there rehearsing their roles. And at the end of the very first evening, at the end of the very first day, there were some changes to make to the score. Andrew had, rethought a little section of it, and Andrew and the musical director, Gareth Valentine, said to me, "Can you phone these through to the copyists to get these changes into the printed score?" And this is the moment that changed my life. I said, "I can actually just do those if you want." And that was it. From that moment on, I became Andrew's musical assistant on that project. So it was ever so slight nudge from musical coordinator to actually being Andrew's sidekick through the thing. So I was responsible for the musical integrity of what he wanted, making its way into the score, and then making its way out to the singers and the orchestra. And that was it. That honestly changed everything, that little moment, because we recorded it. We ended up in Abbey Road with a 90-piece orchestra, and it was so thrilling. And then I'm sat there in the control room with Andrew and the music team, and accepted as part of that team. And then the production, they decided to do it in the West End. And I had one of those sliding doors moments. Andrew asked, would I like to go and assist him for the West End production? And I got places on the postgrad courses at Trinity and the Royal Welsh College. Brilliant. So I really did have a moment of, do I go and do the production, or do I go and do these postgrad courses? And I reasoned that you only get asked once to do a production like that, and the courses would be there the next year. And obviously they still are. So I went and did the production. But that led to a 5-year stint working as Andrew's assistant and basically running his in-house music department. So I became responsible for anything that he created. Andrew would take me across to his office, the other side of the little courtyard behind the conservatory. He would play a new song and I would write it down, as it was being played, recording it as well, but, notating. And then I'd be involved in arranging that as well. I also became sort of like an in-house orchestrator as well, because there were so many projects going on, and the original orchestrations of a lot of them were done on a freelance basis by other people. But as things changed and evolved, we just did that in-house. And often as changes were made to productions, they would sort of have to filter through to other ones. And I was sort of just looking after everything. And it was an incredible time. It really was. And I learned such a lot of things, just being there sort of at the coalface of a music production company that was doing live music every single day and recorded music as well.
Can you explain what you had in your mind when, because you switched from going in one direction and you just changed direction did you have fear of that? What did you think at the time? Because
swapping from stage management to music.
Swapping from like studying computer engineering Deciding, no, it's not for me. I'll switch. Architecture, no, it's not for me. Theatre production, no, it's not for me. Well,
every single one of those.
What did you have in mind, and why? Because, so I'll let you explain. But there's something that I'm also struggling to get through is having the grit to quit, and it's what obviously Steve Bartlett says a lot, where he had the courage to quit. Because sometimes when we insist too much in one direction, because we can hear so much on grit and just not giving up, but sometimes we need to be able to give up to let another opportunity thrive. What did you have in mind?
I've never heard the phrase the grit to quit, but that's interesting. I suppose I don't. Every choice I made was a step closer to the thing I was trying to do. I mean, architecture was a massive mistake that I made early on when forced to choose a degree. When I realized I was doing when I realized I had a place at university for the wrong thing and I had to pick something else, I made the wrong choice. I picked something I was interested in, but not remotely competent at, which, architecture. And from then on, it was steps closer to what I wanted to get to, but unable to make the big step, which was just to try and get onto a music degree, because I didn't have any of the academic background for that. So sidestepping into theatre, stage management was, in my mind, getting closer to the thing I wanted to do. I mean, it was always making stuff. It was just not making my music. It was making somebody else's theatre. But even though that's closer than where I was before. So they're all side steps at a goal. I guess that I've always been so obsessed with music, and that it hasn't felt like a fear of quitting something, because actually it's felt more like a huge achievement in just trying to step closer to the thing I was doing. So the only real moment of fear I had was stepping out into the unknown. This is the only moment I didn't ever have a real plan, was trying to go back and study music and get onto that postgrad course, because I had an income as a stage manager. And if I'd have taken up any of those university places, I mean, God, if I'd got into Juilliard, the fees there are astronomical. I don't know what I would have done. Trinity and Cardiff, less expensive, but still, I'd have had to have found the budget to pay for several years of tuition and have no income as well. So they were but I think I just didn't think. I think I just thought, well, I will solve the issues on the way. I'm fairly good at coping with stuff and remaining calm through things, that I think I just thought, whatever hurdles that throws up, I'll solve them. For instance, when I was at Manchester, actually on my university degree, I worked at the Bridgewater Hall. That was my income. So you can always find a job to carry you on through what you're doing. But no, I didn't. I was more excited by the adventure of changing than being influenced by the fear of it. I think
that's a good mindset.
I think so, and I don't think that was intentional. I think it's just I'm very stimulated by change as well, and I love. I now know this in retrospect. I really love putting myself into situations where I'm slightly scared of what.
It's exciting. It's adrenaline.
Oh, it's so exciting. Those moments where you think, "Oh my God, can I do this?" No idea. I know I can do them. I know I have the skills for them, but they're all new situations.
Yeah.
And I really love that. and I don't know why. I'm sort of slightly addicted to those things. For instance, saying yes to a project that you've not actually fully done that exact thing before. You might have done several bits of it, but I think that's the only way you can be in this industry, because every project is completely new, and it's very easy just to stay in your safe zone and just do the same thing over and over again. I don't thrive in those situations at all. I like the wild, oh my God, what's tomorrow going to bring part of it.
I definitely agree, and I'm a bit like this as well. But you need to be able to know, to get a good balance between the safe carrying on safely, also because I've got responsibilities, like family responsibilities, so you can't do whatever you want. But also not being scared of changing or doing something new.
Yeah, I would say the change has never been a scary thing. In fact, I'm more fearful of staying put, which is, I don't know what that says. But also I must acknowledge that I don't have kids. I don't have those responsibilities. I'm married, which actually is the most incredible supportive sort of framework to a life. And I don't think it's any surprise that I've been more productive in my married years than I ever was as a single man. And I don't know, I'm sure that's down to partying, leading a reckless life. But also I think it's partly that once you're in a very stable, comfortable situation where you're supported by somebody who genuinely wants good, happy things for you, you thrive in that situation. Well, I certainly do anyway.
I heard that about partying and everything. I heard that people who were married and in a partnership, and also had kids, were living much longer.
Living longer,
yeah. And people who didn't.
Tim Minchin talks about it. He said he married quite early, and he said that was brilliant because he said it just calmed him down. He said it stopped him going out on crazy alcoholic benders, and actually just made him settle down and make stuff. And that's great. I mean, for all this talk of loving change, I actually have a very, very almost like a school timetable that I work to still. When I start work, how long I do it, when I take lunch. I have a structure to my day that's so I need that routine. But outside of that routine, I need everything else to be constantly changing and stimulating.
I'm obsessed about productivity and trying to be as productive as I can, because I've got, the more I go in my life, the less time I have.
Yeah, of course. And so you need to maximize your efficiency. Yeah.
And obviously it's related to the family, but also other reasons. It's interesting. You just make the most of as soon as you've got free time.
Yeah, I find I have two productivity levels. Not productive enough, or massively overproductive, stressed. I don't really do well in the middle zone of a reasonable output.
Yeah.
Like I'm on a project and there's not enough time and I just write unbelievable amounts of music and get so much done and work crazy hours. Or my other state is not lazy, not idle, but not as much as perhaps I could. And there's no sort of in between for me at all.
Yeah,
it's
the same for
one
me.
extreme or another, I think. But I think that's earned. If you do those crazy times, you can't reasonably keep that level up. So I think you're allowed to give yourself a little bit of an easy time. You've got to take those opportunities when they arise.
I used to feel bad of not being productive or not doing productive things, but you understand from listening to others. Even this productivity gurus who make you feel really, really, really bad of not being able to focus for like longer than 4 hours, something like this. But I've learned also that sometimes you just can't keep that productivity level constantly, which makes you think, having worked in a big company where you have to work in set hours and every hour needs to be chargeable and need to work on certain projects, and obviously we need to be able to make money on every project, therefore we need to be profitable, and there's like performance figures at the end of each month saying how you've performed. This is not sustainable. You can't be productive from 9 to 5 constantly.
Well, you can make something, but it's probably rubbish.
There's probably why a lot of work. Maybe these companies are rubbish.
Maybe. I think I was saying this at the beginning. You can write. Anybody can write something, but it's just different levels of good. And if I have to, if you ask me now to write something before midday, I'd be able to write something, but it probably won't be great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think certainly in parts of media and film music industry, there is a sort of people kind of idolize people who can turn out music quite quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a great way to think about it, because I don't think very good things are made that quickly at all. And actually, it's one of the reasons when I'm working on projects, and maybe we're in rehearsal, maybe it's a live theatre type thing or something, I don't like solving the issue instantly. And I think they're quite show-offy, those moments. When you say you're in a room full of people and this little moment doesn't work. There are composers, there are musicians who like to go, oh, well, in that case, do this, or change it to that. It's so easy to think up those solutions, but the first solution is not usually the best one. Mm-hmm. And I could very easily fix it there and then, but it will be probably a bit rubbish.
Yeah.
And I'd rather just say, cool, we'll skip over that now and give me some time to think about it. And I'd rather take that away and go and try 20 solutions on my own time and then come back with a really good one. There's a sort of show-offiness to being able to fix things on the spot that, or work very quickly, that I think makes people feel good that they've done something fast, but it's not necessarily a great solution. And I try and avoid that.
Would you say that you're particularly talented at composing an orchestrated thing?
Oh, what a question.
It's just because you ended up in that situation because you kept repeating and writing a load of shit? Probably, maybe. A lot of good music as well, but a lot of stuff that made you like in a better position than others because you had produced more and you had explored more. I'm interested, especially for a lot of people. The music is so much on talent, and people will estimate themselves as not talented. So music is not for me, and that we discussed it yesterday with Gavin Higgins about this. And music needs to be, it's not just for talented people, it's also for just everybody, and everybody needs to have access to music. And so I'm also really interested in talent versus practice. And then practice. And when we think too much sometimes that people are really talented, but we forget that they've practiced a lot. Yeah. What do you think is your situation?
I think that the greatest gift you can be born with is being interested in something.
Yeah.
And what we call talent, I think often is actually just somebody who really likes doing that thing.
Yeah.
And without being forced to, does that thing enough to get quite good at it. And, there are people who are naturally, for instance, good at running or throwing or catching or whatever, and there are people who are naturally very expressive at music, but they're just the raw materials. You can be good at that, but if you're not interested in doing it, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't develop into anything. And so I think I've been lucky enough that I think I am very expressive with music. I had my music teacher at secondary school said that he thought I was the most naturally musically gifted person that he'd worked with. But at that point, I wasn't like grade 8 at piano or anything like that. I think I had the raw material, the fact that music came out of me in some way and in a very expressive way, and the way I performed things. But I didn't actually, at that point, hadn't really done the practice to develop that.
Yeah.
Or take that. So I think the first thing is being lucky enough to be born with the raw material. The second thing is being born with the interest to do it, because you could be expressive at music but not want to do anything with it. Luckily I was. And then the third thing is actually doing that enough to let all those other things gel together and
hard work
and become a thing. But
I hope people will not, obviously that question is a bit tricky because you could be perceived as pretentious or arrogant, but you're not. I have to precise it.
I didn't mean that at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to create any misunderstanding. You're very humble, but it's quite interesting. So obviously you've practiced a lot, and probably more than the average.
I'd say so. But I think the interest means the practice doesn't feel like practice.
Yeah.
Because I get so much joy out of it. I've sat and I've studied scores every day of my life without feeling like that was a chore in any way. And they're the things that I think make you better at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Picking apart how other people have done stuff like that. And that sort of self-study that I was completely delighted to read the other day that John Williams does exactly the same. He will sit down with a Beethoven score and just sit and work out why it works. And I love that he still gets joy from doing that. I've always enjoyed doing that. And yes, it's arrogant of me to put myself and John Williams in the same sentence. But,
yeah. You're not arrogant. Again, I say that a second time. You're not arrogant, and sorry in a way for asking that question.
But yeah, I think being interested in something and having a natural aptitude for part of it means it sort of spirals and self-perpetuates and grows and becomes a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think, nobody can naturally pick up a guitar and just play it at all.
You have to, regardless of how talented you are.
Simply doesn't exist.
Yeah. Abbey Road.
Oh, yes. So
how is it? I've never been there. I'm sure a lot of people, some people who will listen to it will have been there and will think, what are they talking about? I've never been in Abbey Road. I would love having an episode about it. One of the projects I have for High Point is that because I'm getting to